All right, we are live. Let's give it a few minutes and then we will start. Hope everybody's Thursday is going well.
Yes, yes, yes. Awesome. Okay. So, thank you for those who have joined in right on time. As Jonathan said, we're going to give it, a few minutes, let people stroll on in while we get things set up on our end. And we will talk about the true opportunity that we are seeing today in today's real estate market, which is off market in the assignment sales in that segment. So we're excited.
We'll
Just a
thumbs
few more
up.
minutes and then we will get things started.
All right, let's get it going, right, Dan?
Let's do it. Perfect.
Let's do it. So, the true opportunity in today's real estate market, I'm sure some of you have heard of assignments. If you haven't, an assignment is pre-construction that is now being flipped its contract to a new purchaser. We're going to go into the depths of the real opportunity and what we're seeing in this subsection of the marketplace and your next investment and why it should be in the assignment space.
So a little bit about us. If you haven't heard of us before, we are the Zadigan Group. We are a team here out in Toronto. We've been around for about 20, 25 years now. We are local as well as national and global for different types of real estate. So your traditional real estate, we are local here within Toronto and GTA. When it comes to the assignment space, which we're going to be getting into now, we are national with that. And when it comes to pre-construction, we are global. So we are in Canada, US, Mexico, Caribbean, Europe, and Dubai. Now, moving on to assignment sale. What is an assignment? As Jonathan just mentioned, this is when somebody has purchased pre-construction, let's say 4 or 5 years ago from a builder. They're now coming up onto their completion, typically within the next maybe 6 to 12 months. And they're looking to assign that contract to a new buyer, such as yourself. That's where assignment has come from. And basically what that means for you as a buyer is that all the rights and obligations that this purchaser has already agreed to with the builder, you would be taking them on wholeheartedly.
Yeah. Now, just to expand on that a little bit, the reason why, like, especially if you're an investor or if you're an end user, for that matter, if you're looking for a deal, the reason why we're seeing more opportunity in assignments today is because we have some people, unfortunately, who over leveraged themselves back in 2019, 2020, 2021, and they bought multiple units with no intent of closing. And now they're coming closer to closing, and obviously, with no intent of closing, now they cannot close. They can't close the 3 to 5 units that they currently have, and they have to offload. And because they have to offload off market, it makes it a little bit trickier. So if they don't have representation, they can't get in front of the right eyeballs, then typically it sells for a little bit cheaper than market value. Now, the buying process, assignments in themselves, it's not the same as resale. Resale is very straightforward. Assignments are a little bit more complex. But again, I mean, we do this every single day. So it's like the back of our hand for us. In terms of, basically how we go through that process, first we analyze the right deal. So once we understand, okay, you know what, we're looking for a condo in Toronto, say 800 square feet, we're looking for 900,000. Then we find the right deal. We see the market value on it, what we're buying it for, what the equity is in it on the buy. We understand the pricing on it, which is pretty similar to resale in that sense. And then we offer what we think is worth, basically the price. Then we get into acceptance, consent, and closing. So here is where the assignment differs from a resale. A resale is we determine market value, we put an offer, you got a 30, 60, 90-day close, and we close on it, and it's pretty straightforward. With an assignment, you've pretty much got 2 or 3 closings, depending on whether you're buying a condo or a freehold, and depending on if there's any interim occupancy in that project or not. Once we get into an acceptance, so say the seller accepts our offer, then typically we go into a conditional period, which is a little bit different than resale. Resale, you've got a status certificate review. Here we have lawyer review. And on the buying side, it's pretty important to have a lawyer review condition. The reason being is because, as Daniel said before, what you're buying with an assignment is you're buying an original contract to a pre-construction agreement. So you're taking over that contract. Now, by you taking over that contract, you want to know what you're basically buying. And typically those agreements are 50, 60 pages long. So a lawyer would review that, understand it, and advise you accordingly on what your closing costs may be, and so on and so forth. Then we get into the consent. So once we firm up on that deal, we firm up on the condition that we've got, then because we're buying a contract to a builder agreement, the builder has to approve the transfer by way of an assignment consent agreement or an amendment to the agreement. They have to amend the original contract purchaser name to then you as the assignee purchaser name on that contract. And once you have that in place, then you've fully taken over that assignment or that original builder contract. Then we get to closing. So there's 2 closings really with pre-con, but if we're talking about freehold, you'll do the assignment closing, which is the consent, and you'll go to the final closing with the builder because there's only going to be 1 closing. But if we're talking about a condo, then if you're buying it before occupancy period, then you'll close on occupancy with the builder, with your lawyer, you'll get the keys to your unit, and you'll go through the interim occupancy period until you get to final closing, and then you'll have a secondary closing there. And the final closing is when you actually register your mortgage and you close on the property.
And just to make it clear for those of you maybe that are not well versed with pre-construction, how that works, interim occupancy, again, this is specific for condos. Interim occupancy is the day that you get the keys to your unit. So if you're moving in, you can start to move in. If you're an investor, you can start to rent it out if you do have that right in your contract. At this point, you have not assumed a mortgage yet. You're not paying a mortgage payments yet. That doesn't happen until the final closing, once the whole building gets registered and everybody closes at the same time.
Now, in terms of deals, if you're an investor, an end user, everybody's looking for a deal, and we all love deals. In this off-market space, typically speaking, we can find deals anywhere between 10 to 30% under market value, depending on the deal and depending, when it was purchased and so on and so forth. We have deals like a month or 2 ago where we bought deals that are $200,000, $300,000 less than what they bought it for. But it really depends. Once we go through that analysis period and we understand, okay, you know what, this is what we're after, then we would run the comparisons to see what kind of deal you're actually getting on this. But there is opportunity. And typically speaking, in comparison to resale, obviously not today's resale market, but in comparison to resale versus assignments, you're typically not competing against multiple people. So we sometimes have the upper hand.
So yeah, I mean, Jonathan already went over this slide. Really, why is it lucrative to buy an assignment in today's market? I think it's important to have a little bit of historical context when going through this slide. traditionally assignments always commanded anywhere from $50,000 to $200,000 of, quote unquote profit that a buyer would have to pay a seller in order to purchase that assignment. So traditionally, you always had to be somewhat of a cash-heavy investor, which is why it has been such a niche piece of our real estate industry. But nowadays, just with how the market has been going, things are pretty much going, at the original price that people bought at 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, if not lower. So this has presented an opportunity for a lot of first-time home buyers, first-time assignment investors, even first-time investors themselves as a whole, who maybe they haven't been able to break into the resale market. Now there's this opportunity that you can get in lower than what is possible with the existing inventory.
Yeah, and we've seen like all walks of buyers come into assignments in the past 2.5 years. First time home buyers, big time investors, smaller investors. There's really opportunity for everybody, and because a majority of people can't actually locate these deals and find them, it's all done through internal networks. It becomes a lot more lucrative in this off market space. Now, why are they selling for cheap? We touched on it a little bit earlier, but we're going to go into 3 points here of, basically why they're selling for cheap. The first point is they can't qualify for a mortgage. Mortgage rates from 2021, 2020 in comparison to now, they're obviously, quite a bit of a difference. In 2020, we were living in heaven. But now the interest rates are a little bit higher. So with stress tests and qualifications, even if it was a single unit investor, they may not qualify for the same amount of mortgage, unfortunately. So it's come to a point where they have to assign their contract, or they would have to go for maybe a private lender, which majority of people don't want to do. The second point here is a tight deadline. When a builder notifies basically a seller that they have to close, they're given a short amount of time period to basically close, which is about 60 days. And because of such a timeline, they need someone on the table quickly in order to actually purchase this kind of unit. So if it's coming closer to closing and it's very close to closing, you'll typically see people, again, hash their prices, because if they don't, and if they aren't able to move it, then they would default with the builder, which, unfortunately,
a whole can of worms that they would be opening up.
Which
they do not want to go through.
Which people don't want to go through, right? And the third point is they need to sell off market, right? So as part of these builder contracts, builders ultimately, when they sell pre-construction units at the initial stage of, say, 2020, they may sell 70% of units to get to construction financing, and then they're going to hold the 30% and sell them over that course of the 4 years that condo is being developed. And maybe they'll keep back, maybe they'll sell 20% within the next few years, and they'll keep 10% back until closing, on the assumption that they can sell it for obviously more. So they always write in, basically the assignment provisions or in the original contract saying that if you want to assign your contract, you cannot advertise and put it on MLS and so on and so forth. So they all got to be done, basically an internal network. So it's got to be sold off market. Now, if a builder finds that you've advertised it on MLS and it's being blasted out there, they obviously don't like that, because they typically have inventory that they want to sell and they don't want you to compete against them. So they'll send typically sellers maybe 1 or 2 letters, and then after that, they'll just terminate their contract and forfeit their deposit.
If you're lucky. Not all builders are that nice. Just to recap, one thing I want to talk about here, because some questions that I've been getting in the last year or so from first-time assignment buyers is, how are these conditions that we're facing right now in the market different from distressed deals maybe in resale? Why are we seeing more frequency of distressed sales in the assignment space? So it's important to understand how pre-construction buyers, a lot of them, unfortunately, have operated. When they originally purchased these contracts 3 or 4 years ago, they were making decisions based off I like to call the free rates that we had. Now, a smart pre-con buyer would have gotten their mortgage qualification approved well in advance of their closing, ideally at the time that they're purchasing. But not a lot of people did that. And now that they're coming up for their closing and it's time to gear up for this mortgage, it is now that they are realizing, shoot, we are in absolutely no position to get this. Unlike with resale, where maybe if you're behind on payments, Canadian banking system makes it a very, very, very long road before they come after your house and force a sale. It's not like the U.S. Canadian banking system. We're not in the business of taking people's homes. So that's one aspect of it. And then the deadline, as Jonathan mentioned, that's something that's very unique to assignments. There is no deadline in a resale market. If a seller needs to sell, yes, they may have their own deadlines, but I'm talking about external deadlines from third parties. Typically, we don't have something like that. They could drag it on for as long as they can to hold on to their property before they get to a power of sale point. With assignment sellers, they've got a very, very concrete deadline of when they need to sell. And if they do not sell by then they are forced to close. And with majority of these people, they can't. So then we open up that can of worms of defaulting with the builder.
Yeah, it's a really good point there. I mean, just to emphasize on that, resale versus assignment in terms of distress, I would say differs quite substantially. I mean, we work a lot in resale as well. And in resale, when we're selling a property, typically speaking, it's not too much in distress because there's no hard deadline to sell it by. So whether we sell it this week or we sell it next month or the month afterwards, if there's a tenant in there, they're still paying their rent, then it's not really the end of the world per se. But with an assignment, obviously, it's a completely different ballgame. Now, are all contracts assignable? So this is a question that we get quite often. There's thousands of pre-construction units that have been sold over the years, and not all contracts are assignable, which we'll get into, the nitty-gritty of it. So you need a lot of money to buy an assignment. Is this a myth or a fact? Sorry, this is the next slide. I'm going to go back and I'm going to touch on this a little bit for a second. So are all contracts assignable? No, they're not. So a majority of pre-construction, when it was sold in, the platinum access time period or the VIP access time period, a majority of the incentives that were offered by the builder are typically a right to lease during occupancy for a condo. It's typically a free assignment or an assignment for $5,000 or whatever it may be. That was typically the incentive that was offered because a lot of the investors who wanted to buy pre-construction wanted to flip them on assignment, which historically speaking, again, like Daniel said, was making, between $50,000 to $200,000. We were doing $250,000 flips. We even had some that were $500,000 flips back in 2020, 2021. But there are a percentage of projects, typically in the low-rise segment, typically in like townhomes and single families, where the builder does not allow assignments. Or if they do allow assignments, then we'd have to really push for it and there would be a big fee for it. But not all contracts are assignable. So that's one thing that we do look at before we get into a project like that. Now back to this one. Do you need a lot of money to buy an assignment? Is this a myth or a fact? So back in like 2020, 2021, when contracts were selling with $100,000 or $200,000 profit, typically speaking, the buyer would have had to put up, say the original price was $1 million, we were buying it for $1.2 million, and there was 20% down on $1 million original purchase price. Typically, the buyer would have had to put up about $400,000 in cash to take over that contract because the seller wouldn't have wanted to assign the contract to the new buyer and lose all their rights to the contract without getting the full cash payout. Now, nowadays it's a little bit different. If something is selling for the original purchase price, say $1 million it was bought for, and now we're buying it for $1 million, you're paying back the 20%. So it's still an 80% loan to value. You don't have to put up quite a substantial amount of money. And then in another scenario, if you're buying it less than $1 million, if you're buying it for 900, then you got to put up only $100,000 as opposed to putting up 200.
So this is a case study here of one of our own assignment listings that we did recently. So this is at a project in Etobicoke called 36 Zora. This snapshot here is straight from the assignment agreement. If you've done real estate transactions before and resale, you know that we do use ARIA forms. So there is one that is specific for assignment as well that does have this special page with the number breakdown all in there. This particular unit that we had, the total amount needed here was $149,000 and change. The assignee is putting $45,000 of the remaining on the consent. So this property had $0 in profit on the assignment. And so you can see that it was bought right at the original price. And this one here was for 855 square feet, 2+ den, 2 bath with a parking and a locker. How does this compare to the rest of the market? So this is something that we do with you guys before we're considering an assignment is, okay, here's the assignment deal. Here's how it compares to the resale market or what is also comparable out there. The identical unit was being sold by the builder for $1,025,000, right? And just to go back to recap, our buyer here was picking it up at a 4 years ago pricing for $490,000, right? So that's one example. We've got another example here at the Well. Jonathan, you want to talk about this one?
Yeah, this is another one at the Well, 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 1 parking, 1125 square feet. Purchased for $1,275,000. The original purchase price was $1,520,000. So the seller was taking, if my mental math is right, at 200 and change loss there. So the total baked in equity on the deal was about actually that's the number, $175,000. And the deposit that was paid on the original contract was $310,000. So the way that we look at, basically a deal like this is we look at whatever the market value would be. And based on that market value, we pretty much determine, hey, what is it that we're willing to offer? And we see how much baked in equity there is on the buy. Now, there's a few different plays with a deal like this. If you're an investor, as an example, we picked up a similar unit like this, in North York. It was at a similar price point, similar square footage, but the original purchase price was about $1,270,000, and what we picked it up for was about $1,250,000. Now we bought it about a 20%, below market value. What our play was on that deal is buying it, putting the 20% down on the $1,250,000 that we purchased it for, getting the appraisal in, refinancing it, and then our buyer had kept the property with basically zero money in, the 20% equity that he already purchased under market value, and kept the asset basically for a longer time period. For this Well unit, here's the builder inventory with Tridel. Again, they don't sell less than, there's one building at the Well where all units were sold at around $1,400-1,500 a foot. Pretty much no negotiation room with the builder. So given that this one was at the Well, that everybody else in the building had pretty much purchased at that original value. So if they were to come out at one point and sell it, then they would probably want, their original price or more than their original price after closing. But this Well unit, according to the builder, was listed for $1,890,000, and we were able to pick it up for $1,275,000. But this one from the builder inventory was 1,250 square feet, so about 100 and change square feet more.
So this one here is another example of what John was just explaining, of one of the plays you can do with picking up these assignments. Just to recap here, I know sometimes you lose people here if they're not familiar with assignments. If you're picking up an assignment lower than the original, let's say it's $50,000 below the original, that $50,000 is the equivalent amount of deposit money that seller is leaving for you on the table. Sometimes we ask, won't the builder pay back the deposit and then I got to put in my replacement checks? No, it doesn't work like that. Deposit money for pre-construction is attached to the unit, it's attached to the contract, not to the person. So if you're picking up something below the original price, that is the equivalent amount of deposit money that seller is going to leave for you to use with that contract. So this is another case of where we had almost actually more than a total deposit loss on it. Original price was 487. Mobilio condos out in Vaughan by the VMC area for a 1+10. 487 was the original price. The seller had put about $100,000 in deposit in, and we ended up getting it picked up for a buyer at 395, which is actually $116,000 below the original. Now you might be asking, Daniel, the seller only put $100,000 in. How is it that they're taking $116,000 loss? What does that mean? In this case, it means the seller had paid our buyer to take the contract over. This is an extreme case, but I think it's important to highlight it because it kind of shows you the possibility of what is actually what is possible in the assignment space, which is just either not possible or you never hear about it in the resale market. This is another example of how as soon as this one closed, the buyer went ahead and refinanced it. It was worth 20% than what they originally purchased for. They were able to get their full money out and basically be in this deal at zero actual cash equity into it.
Yeah. Now keep in mind that 116 loss. Just to clarify on that, the 116 loss was, I believe, including realtor fees.
Right.
Because the 487 minus 395, it works out to about 92, 95, roughly around there, and baked in equity.
Right. And again, for reference, comparable project from the builder inventory comparable unit, is going anywhere in the high 600s, where our buyer was able to pick it up in just below 400. And to take it a step further, here is an identical unit at the exact same condo that had sold just a few weeks prior to our buyer picking this up. It had sold for, you can see right there on the top right, $540,000. This is straight off of the MLS sold data record. So, you can see that baked in equity actually coming right to pen to paper here with this one.
Now, why buy an assignment? We're bullish on Toronto real estate and GTA real estate with immigration numbers, with the rise of construction and all the new development coming here, and all the people who want to move to Toronto and so on and so forth. With the market in general. From what we're hearing and what's been going around in the industry, it sounds like maybe sometime in September, the next rate drop, we may see another 50 basis point drop. It sounds like. Don't quote me on that. Hopefully we see that. That would be great. But going forward, I think typical cycles like this typically last 18 to 24 months, historically speaking. With what we're going through, we're pretty much at the tail end of what we're going through in today's marketplace. And I think 2025 will be a completely different year than 2024 and 2023 and 2022 has been. And I think we're going to see, quite a bit of growth, especially when people feel more comfortable getting back into the marketplace. People have been sitting on the sidelines. A lot of people have been sitting on the sidelines in 2023, in 2024. Same thing, but a majority of our clients have been wanting to get in, and 2025, I think we're going to see that true spike. But really the opportunity. We look at resale market, we look at pre-com market, we look at all residential markets. Right now, really where we're seeing the biggest opportunities in assignments, and it's just because of those deadlines and the off-market space and so on and so forth. They're harder to locate. They're harder to locate the right deal. Yes. And it's a bit more, work to find the right deal. But if you can find it, then pounce on it and get it, because I don't think we're going to be in this market for too long. Immigration and effect on, population growth. Maybe Daniel, you want to touch on this?
Yeah, this is more like the long-term vision. We're bullish on Canada, bullish on Toronto long-term. Obviously short-term, and right now we're going through the cycle as we usually do from time to time. But really what we're looking at it is, Toronto as a whole and Canada as a whole, we've got a very, very severe supply deficiency. And no matter which way you look at it, we have a significantly more amount of people in this country than we did 4 years ago. and they do need to be housed. At the end of the day, housing is a basic need. And even though we see all the cranes in the sky, Toronto is the crane capital of the world. It unfortunately is just not going to be enough. We are not building quick enough. One of the main reasons for that is the heavy amount of government taxes that are put on builders, which ultimately does trickle down to you as an owner when you're picking up these pre-con contracts. It's very counterintuitive, and I can go on and on about the policies that we have and how they work against this goal of putting more housing into the marketplace. But this is a really great graph that we like to show, really to put into perspective. People like to kick and scream about the big bad builder, but when you look at it more closely, they really are not taking home as much as you might think. In fact, the biggest beneficiary of new housing supply in this city is the government on all levels: municipal, provincial, and federal. Everybody wants their cut, and they do make sure that they do get their cut. So it's made it very difficult, especially after COVID. They're still reeling from supply chain issues. In this city, we've got a future labor shortage that is coming. As the old-timers are exiting the industry, we're not having enough young blood coming in to fill their shoes. So long term, I do see our supply crunch. The worst of it is coming, and basic supply and demand is going to take back into effect.
Yeah, just touch on this a little bit. As you can see in this chart here, I mean, for a condo building, their average profit margin as a developer is 9 to 12%. But you can see a large chunk of it, which is 22 to 27%, is governmental charges, development fees, and so on and so forth. They have development fees, educational levies, park levies. The developer is building a condo. They have to basically put money towards new schools and new parks in the area, infrastructure, and so on and so forth. The soft costs to build are 12 to 20%, and the construction costs right now are 35 to 45% of the entire project. So the profit margin really for a developer, like if a developer is coming out at $1,400-$1,500 a foot in Toronto, then their profit margin is pretty slim. So that's why we haven't really seen in the pre-con realm, we haven't really seen a decrease in pricing, because there's not much room a developer really has to basically adjust their prices. But we're obviously seeing a decrease in the assignment prices because the assignment unit owners do not operate under that same assumption with building a condo. It's just about their individual circumstance.
So this stuff we kind of already talked about. And then this one, this is something that's really unique with assignments. How can you purchase with less down? Now, this may not apply to everybody. If it's something that's there for you, amazing, that's great. But as we were saying, we've been having a lot of first-time home buyers approaching us with this assignment segment. If you either do not have your full 20%, or maybe you're an investor that you're looking to put in less down payment than what actually be necessary, this is where assignments is really unique.
Yeah, one thing
we kind of went over it a little bit, that if you're purchasing below the original price, that is the equivalent deposit that a seller is leaving for you to use towards that contract. So when it's time to come and go get your mortgage, the bank is going to see, oh, okay, this contract has 20% deposit money already put into it. But in actuality, you as an assignment buyer, maybe you actually put cash in hand only 5%. Right.
Yeah, like one thing I'll mention on that front too is it really just depends on the lender. Some lenders, they may do a structure like this. It's just creative financing. And some big, bank lenders, they may not do it. So there's two different ways around this. If they don't do it like that, where you would have to have the money up front, where you wouldn't have to have the money up front, then the way you would do it is on this example right here, $1 million purchase, original price 1.2. You would put the 20% down to $1 million. We'd get an appraisal in hand at $1.2 million. We guarantee it through the bank that right after closing, 5 days after closing, we can refinance the money out. And you already have the 20% equity in there to pull out right after closing. And that's how you can buy it with pretty little down. So it depends on what lender you're working with, how the structure is. but that's something that we can look through and we can see if we can do something on that front. And then taking action. So understanding deadlines, understanding cash required, be proactive and get your pre-approval and do the math. I would say like our window of opportunity is not too big, I would say, as we get into 2025 and 2026. We're talking about purchase contracts for condos that happened in 2021, 2022, 2023, even at kind of the peak of the market. So understanding, basically when you're ready to jump in, what kind of price point you're looking at, what kind of property you're looking for, whether it's an investment or an end use, understanding how much cash is required to get into it, putting that cash away, and then, saving towards this. And being proactive and getting your pre-approval is important. Speak to a mortgage broker, understand, basically how much you'd be approved for. We have contacts ourselves. We're key partners with banks, so I'm more than happy to make an introduction to one of our contacts for you guys. And then doing the math, right? Understanding the numbers, underwrite some of these deals, look at them, chat with us. We can tell you what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. 80% of deals may not make sense, but the 20% may make sense. And it's just about finding the right ones that do. So it's important for potential buyers of assignment to conduct thorough due diligence, understand the terms of the original agreement, and assess the market conditions. Additionally, seeking legal and financial advice is advisable to ensure a smooth and compliant, kind of deal. So, lawyers are important, especially in assignments. Financial advisors, if you have a financial advisor, understanding and having a chat with them. We will chat with you on the real estate side of things, and we'll make sure we're finding the right deal. But assignments in general, all in all, I think it's a lucrative, place in today's market. Next year, the year after, it may not be the place to invest, but for today, the opportunity that we're finding is in assignments, and we're here to help.
One thing I will put there, just on the lawyer front of it, similar to how 99% of realtors in our industry, they do not touch assignments with a 10-foot pole because they do not understand it. It is not, what we've learned in our training. It's not something you can Google. Same thing goes for lawyers. You may have a real estate lawyer that you've used time and time again and that you trust. However, if you're coming into an assignment space, I would highly, highly encourage that you do make sure that they are well versed in this assignment type of real estate transaction. Not all real estate lawyers know what they are doing when it comes to assignments. We've got a team of assignment real estate lawyers that we would trust our life with, that we always recommend to use. As the rules are always continuously changing, and they are always on top of it. They are seeing hundreds of these assignment deals coming through, and they know how they need to speak with the builders when applying with the consent, and so on and so forth, to make sure that you as a consumer are not feeling any of that complexity. Although we are preaching how complex an assignment is, if you have a good agent by your side, you have a good lawyer by your side, you as a consumer, you should be able to sleep easy at night, that things are going to be going smoothly.
Yeah, and like just to touch on that a little bit too, it's the lawyer is really crucial. We've dealt with a lot of lawyers, and the advice that a lawyer gives is different than the advice that a broker would give. The advice that a lawyer would give would be to really understand and go through that 60-page contract and tell you, hey, you know what, this is what your closing costs are probably going to be. Versus what we would give is just making sure that we find the right deal and we put in the right clauses. But without a competent lawyer on your side, you could be getting into something that would not be a nice experience, not be a pleasant experience, especially if you don't know what your closing costs are going to be. Closing costs and resale are way different than assignments. Resale is pretty standard. It's, your legal fees and your
transfer
tax, versus assignments. You do have a little bit more closing costs over on top of that, including your development charges and so on and so forth. One thing that lawyer would look at is, are your development charges capped, right? That's really important. If your development charges in Toronto are not capped, as an example, a one-bedroom could be passed on to you as $35,000 in development fees as part of your closing costs. If they are capped, maybe they're capped at 8,000, right? So that's one thing that a lawyer comes into play, and they really understand, and they can give you the advice on that.
So that is that. We will open up the floor if anybody has any questions. Otherwise, you know where to find us. We're always happy to chat, have a conversation. Obviously, there's only so much we can talk about within, an hour's time. There's a lot of moving parts to this. So we do encourage you, if you want to have more one-on-one session, we can really break things down a lot further. If there was anything you missed on this, then we are happy to do that.
Yeah, feel free. We're here. We also have, we do these webinars quite often. So we've got, a bunch of webinars up on our website as well. We talk about, different types of properties, assignments, and so on and so forth. But we're here. Any questions, we're here to answer. If not, then we can wrap it up.
I've got one question, which I'm getting questions a lot recently, is kind of what you just touched on there, John, about, is next year, are we still going to have these types of opportunity for assignments? Professionally, I think no. And it's exactly, you kind of skim through it, but I think it's important that people understand the last 18 months is really where this, opportunity for assignment has been. And that window as a buyer, it is closing. Why? Because once we get into 2025, 2026, we are now going to be dealing with assignment sellers who are holding on to contracts that they purchased when pre-construction pricing was at an all-time high. Now, you might be asking, okay, what does that got to do with me as an assignment buyer? What that means is that there's going to be no price possible that it's going to make sense for you as a buyer to pick up those contracts. Even if they are walking away from full 20%, even that price is not going to make sense, and we wouldn't be able to advise you to say it's a good idea to go pick that up. So we're still dealing right now with 2020, 2019. There's even a few 2018 contracts from projects that got delayed that are still out there in the marketplace, which is why we're still recommending the assignment space as a good opportunity. But come next year, a lot of those projects are going to be closing, and then we're going to have to be dealing with the 2021, 2022, and possibly even 2023 contracts where 9 out of 10 of them are probably not going to make sense.
Yeah, like I'll say, freehold is obviously way different than condos. But, if we look at, just as an example, the price per square foot in Toronto from, let's say, 2018 to 2023, 2018, you were buying projects like Nobu and Nobu is a premium building for 1,000, 1,050 per square foot. And a lot of projects were under that. They were $900 a foot, $950 a foot in Toronto. Coming into 2019, you jumped up to, I would say, about 1,000 and change, $1,100 a foot. 2020, you were going to that $1,250, $1,300 a foot range. 2021, you were pushing $1,300, $1,400. 2022, again, you were pushing, in 2022, you're probably pushing $1,400, $1,500 a foot. 2023 onwards, you were pushing upwards of $1,500, $1,600 a foot, which is a majority of the projects that are out there today. So people who bought, certain projects, like there were certain projects in Toronto that sold for $2,000 a foot in 2022 in premium locations, obviously. But the opportunity, the reason why we say there's opportunity today is because we're still finding those purchases from a while back. Now, freehold makes a difference in comparison to condos. Freehold is a little bit different in the sense that the time that they purchased, whether it was 2021 or 2020, depends on what price that they purchased at. But some of them are still worth more, even in today's market, than they were originally purchased for. So it's a little bit different in the condo market. And even condos, some of them too, but it just depends on the project that we're looking at, right? But that's why that analysis part is pretty crucial. But the reason why we don't think that either next year or 2026 there'll be tremendous amounts of opportunity is because, say, somebody bought something for $1 million, which we saw some cases like that where they bought for $1 million, one bedroom in Dens, $950,000 they bought for in Toronto, 650 square feet, buying at the peaks of $1,700, $1,800 a foot. If the market value is sitting at about $1,200, $1,300 a foot today, we're talking about a $500 a foot difference. $500 a foot difference on a 600 square foot unit What's the math on that? We're talking about 300 grand, basically $300,000 difference. So that means that the market value of a resale property would have to appreciate by $300,000 over the course of the next 2 years in order for that property to basically sell at a break-even point. Now, typically somebody on $1 million property would have about 20% down in the deal, 200,000. So even if they wipe the 200,000, the only way that it'll still make sense for an assignment buyer to buy it is if they topped up an additional $100,000 on top to bring it to that market value. That's
Which
why
if a seller is in a position to sell like a $200,000 loss, most likely they're not in a position to pay $100,000 more, right?
That's the thing, right? So that's why we think the window of opportunity is small. But I mean, next year there's going to be different opportunities, right? Like we're always hunting for, whatever opportunity there is in residential real estate. In 2026, there may be completely different opportunities. It just depends. But in today's marketplace, for sure, assignments is the way to go. And that's that.
Awesome.
Amazing.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining in. Again, there is our contact details. You know where to find us. We are a team of about 12 or 13 of us that, we all specialize in this space. So if it's not one of us, somebody on the team will definitely be able to help you out.
Awesome. Thanks so much, guys.
Thanks,
Have a good
guys. All the
Thursday
best.
night.
Take care. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.